Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Hello and welcome to the Disappearing Mind podcast. This is your host, Dawn Platt. I'm so happy that you could join me today. In the podcast today, we're going to have a discussion in and around some common questions that I am repeatedly asked as a dementia coach from a couple perspectives. And I hope that this podcast will be beneficial to you. These are questions that I've been asked over the last 20, 25 years. I mean, they're just common things that people want to know when they're diagnosed or someone that their diagnosis, they want to ask about dementia. And these are real questions. So we're going to go at it from a couple of angles today, but I would recommend in today's podcast that you get a notebook and a pen and sit down with your coffee or your beverage and maybe you want to write some of these things down. This is a type of podcast that I think is very shareable with individuals who are just getting into this journey or curious about this journey. But let's go ahead and get started with some of the common questions that people ask. And these are valid questions. The questions don't always have to have a reason. And people get some good information here and there, but they're just those particular questions, I think, that are important for people to know or maybe concerning. And when they get the answer to them, it's very helpful. But let's get started on this today. So some common questions that I have been asked over the years as a dementia coach. So if you or your loved one has been diagnosed with any type of dementia, it's really crucial to gather information to better understand the condition and to plan for the future. Here are some questions that you may want to ask your doctor and or other healthcare professionals. Your doctor may not be able to answer all these questions. Perhaps your doctor will make a referral or will have some good collateral information of what's available in and around your city, in and around the area, maybe through the hospital or another organization in the area where you live. But let's just talk about some of the questions that you may want to be thinking about and write down that you may want to ask your doctor. We all know we go to the doctor and we have a lot of questions. And sometimes if we're not prepared, we come out and we don't have answers to those questions, or perhaps we haven't even asked those questions at all. Understanding the diagnosis, I think that that's really important. People always confuse Alzheimer's disease and dementia. They see them as one, or someone may have some sort of dementia and people assume that it's Alzheimer's disease. So understanding the diagnosis is real important. We need to ask your healthcare provider, what type of dementia do I have, or does my loved one have? And how did you diagnose it? In other words, do you know the testing and things that were done to confirm that you have this diagnosis, or did the physician, just out of his experience or her experience, give that diagnosis? This is important for you to kind of know and understand for your own peace of mind. What stage of dementia am I in? And what does that mean for my daily life? In this question here, people always ask. There is a gloom and a doom, a cloud that seems to come over people when they hear perhaps that they have dementia. And I think it's important to enlighten yourself that this is not a death sentence, at least not an immediate death sentence. And what does it mean? And we don't want to get into the gloom of things. And let me just give you an example here. Most of you who listen to the podcast know that my mother passed away in March of 2024, and that she was 96 years old. And she was diagnosed with dementia later in life. And the key factors to it were she had a lot of frequent head injuries from falls. But I remember very early on, probably 8 years before her death, she was aging and becoming more forgetful, as people do as we age. But she had gone to her doctor, who had recommended a neurologist. And of course, I was all for it. And of course, at that time, he just straight up told her that she had dementia. And I remember going to visit her, and she was laid out on the couch and the hand over the head kind of thing, and all in despair. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I have dementia." And it seemed to be like the end of the world. And I knew how old my mom was at that time. And I knew that there was going to be some dementia, but she wasn't well into it. And it wasn't impacting her tremendously in her life at that time. And so I simply said to her, "Mom, I wouldn't worry about that." And I even wrote it off because I think that there are stages that you go through. And I knew that. And at that age, when you're over 90 years old, there are other factors that come into play when you're talking about life and death. So, what stage are you in? And what does that mean for your daily life? What is your prognosis? Another question: what are the key symptoms of this type of dementia? So, if the doctor is just generalizing your dementia, we kind of want to know, what should I expect and how will it progress over time? I think that these are real questions, and your doctor, again, may not be able to forecast exactly what those things will be. But certainly, I think that there's peace of mind in having the discussion with your doctor and really having an idea from your healthcare professional of what this might be like. Are there any other conditions that could be contributing to my symptoms? Maybe there's another factor. Maybe you're a brittle diabetic. Maybe you're have out of control blood sugars, or you're hugely obese, or you have another condition such as the stroke or heart disease that is impacting the blood flow to your brain. These conditions, when they're unstable or untreated, can really contribute to dementia. How reliable is the diagnosis? Are you sure? These are the kinds of questions that especially spouses and children like to ask the physician. So that's a good question. Let's talk a little bit about treatment and management. So you're going to want to ask your healthcare professional, what treatment options are available for my type of dementia? Now, there are not going to be a lot, but you always have options, and you're going to want to explore that. Maybe this doctor has been your doctor for 30 years and he's going to treat you all along the way. Or maybe this doctor is going to make a referral to a gerontologist, to a neurologist, or some other type of physician to really manage your dementia. Are there medications that can help manage symptoms, and what are the potential side effects? So, there are medications. There is no cure, but there are medications that are found to be useful in early to mid stages. Are you a candidate for that? Is that something you should be considering? Your doctor can help you with those decisions. What are non medication approaches to help my quality of life? Is there anything else I can do, doc? Are there lifestyle changes or therapies? How will this condition affect my ability to live independently? And what can we do to prepare for my future needs? I mean, I think that that's very important. That preparation is one of the things that children really appreciate. And I think that any family member appreciates knowing that you've considered and you're realistic that your condition is going to change, and you kind of talk about what those things might be, what the options are. And of course, those options are going to depend upon what kind of family support, environmental support you have, where you are financially. Can you afford those options? Or are there other options that are going to be more narrow that you're going to need to talk about and to consider? Is there anything, doc, that I can do to slow the progression of this disease and maintain my memory or my cognitive function? Are there, again, specific diet, exercise, or social activities I can do that may help prolong how I'm doing? What are local resources or support services that are available for people with dementia that I could contact, that I could get more information? Are there any activities or therapies such as cognitive therapy or physical therapy that might help, that I might need? These are all good things to look at and really to consider and to talk about when you're care planning. Let's talk a little bit about what you might talk with your physician about in planning for the future. So, how quickly Can I expect my symptoms to progress? And what should I be prepared for in the short term and the long term? These are good discussions to have when you're there with the doctor. These are deeper, long term things that may not be 100% accurate, but will really be helpful and something you should be able to discuss with your physician. How often will I need to be seen by you, doctor? That is the number one thing that most families tell me when they go to the physician and they get a diagnosis. They do not get clear and defined parameters on how they're doing, how they will progress, how often that they will need to be seen by the doctor. I've even had families tell me that the doctor said, okay, you have dementia. Here you go. See you again in 6 months. They are clueless of what's going to happen in the 6 months. They're helpless in knowing maybe what they should do or even what they could do. And that's really important to caregivers, it's important to the individual. Talk about that. How often will I need to be seen? Should I call you if I run into something? And what would that look like? Consider these other types of questions you may want to discuss with your physician. How can I ensure my wishes are respected as the disease progresses? And will I have difficulty communicating? I mean, we know that many types of dementia impact speech, impact good quality processing skills, and even the ability to talk. Talk with your physician about that. Or is there paperwork that you need to begin getting together in the future for his office, for your chart there, and for other types of planning that will come forth? Maybe your spouse needs to have access to your medical records. Maybe your children will need to be able to call from another state to get information on you and talk with your physician on your behalf. What should I know about my long-term care options, doctor? Do you have any good suggestions? Or if I used home care or assisted living or memory care, are there any that you work with? Would you still be my doctor? So that's another really good question that you would want to write down and at some point talk with your doctor about. How often should I follow up with you? I mentioned that, but what should I monitor between visits? Is there anything I should be looking for? Charting the unknown on the dementia journey can be really difficult for families. And there are a lot of questions, I think, that can be answered and putting you at ease. It's an unknown path. Feeling more at ease and talking about these kinds of questions with your physician can help you gain a clearer understanding of diagnosis, treatment options, and ways to manage your condition going forward. Let's switch a little bit to other common questions that I have gotten as a dementia coach. These questions cover a wide range of concerns, from understanding the disease to managing daily life planning for the future. These are really specific to people who have actually received a diagnosis or an indication that they have Alzheimer's disease. In this, I want to answer some of these questions. And when I answer the questions, it's not the total answer. There are many answers to some of these questions that I've been asked. I think that having an idea of what some of these answers might be would be helpful to you in knowing where you are and what kind of things are going to be helpful to you as you plan for life and as you plan for care. So, what is Alzheimer's disease and how is it different from other dementias? Alzheimer's disease is a very specific type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior. It's the most common form of dementia that we see, and it worsens over time. There is no cure, and it comes in pretty specific stages, although not everyone has the same symptoms. There are other types of dementia, such as vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and frontal temporal dementia. Each one is different in cause and in symptoms. There are some specifics that you may want to know. One of the reasons why I always bring this up is I don't want people to hear information and confuse some of the things that they might be hearing about Alzheimer's disease, and they have a totally different kind of dementia, and they assume that that is the case for them. It is just not the case. And that's why it's really important to note that there are differences in the course and types of dementia that we do see. What causes Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia? The exact cause of AD isn't fully understood. We don't have an answer to that, but it involves an abnormal protein deposit in the brain that we tend to refer to as amyloid plaques and tau tangles. These two things damage the neurons. Other dementias can be caused by factors like blood vessel damage, such as in vascular dementia, or abnormal proteins in the brain cells, Lewy body dementia. So there are different causes for each of these dementias. What is the early signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease? The early signs include memory loss, confusion about time or place, difficulty completing familiar tasks, poor judgment, trouble with language, and changes in mood or personality. These are very specific to Alzheimer's disease. How is it diagnosed? Doctors typically diagnose Alzheimer's disease through a combination of medical history and physical, cognitive testing, neurological exams, brain imaging, such as a CT scan, an MRI, or PET scan, and ruling out other causes. Now and recently, we do see the effectiveness of more blood work and blood tests that are being used and being invented each year to identify this at a much earlier rate. So this is really important. But a definitive diagnosis really is made through a number of factors that doctors use. It used to be that it was only after death and an autopsy, but now an accurate diagnosis can be made through a number of measures that your physician will use, including the new blood testing. So what are the stages of Alzheimer's and how does this disease progress over time? Alzheimer's disease typically progresses through three very general stages. I'll get into the other stages in another podcast, but typically what we're going to define is the mild, the moderate, and the severe stages of Alzheimer's disease. The mild stage or the early stage, you're going to see some memory lapses. They may be here or there, trouble with complex tasks, and mood changes. Unless you're really close to the person or know the person well, these may not be consistent. They may not happen every day, but those are the kinds of things that are early on that we see. And I think we can all relate to that as we age, that we see some of these things happening. But let's move on to the middle stage, what we call the moderate stage of Alzheimer's disease. We begin to see increased memory loss, confusion, difficulty recognizing people, and behavioral changes. All of these factors are going to vary with the individual and the severity and location of where the Alzheimer's disease damage occurs in the brain. Then there's the late stage, what we call the severe stage of Alzheimer's disease, where we see the total loss of ability to communicate, even other factors of what we call activities of daily living. They become dependent. They need total help for those. Caring for themselves, and eventually physical functions decline in this stage. So this is the last stage of life for somebody in Alzheimer's disease. These are good questions and things to know about if we're talking specifically about Alzheimer's disease. Who's at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease? That's a good question. We know that there are some risk factors, and I like to review these every year with the statistics for the Alzheimer's Association on their website. If you have not visited the alzheimersassociation.com, you'll see there's wonderful resources that they're updated with the latest research. They're updated every year, but who is at risk? Well, risk factors include age. Typically, the most common age would be over the age of 65, although we do see early onset. We don't rule that out. Family history is another factor. Genetics, head trauma, heart disease, diabetes, and lifestyle factors like poor diet and obesity and lack of physical activity. We typically can see that this is contributing factors. That's important to know. Is Alzheimer's disease hereditary? Well, I get it if a family member has it. The answer to that is a family history of Alzheimer's disease increases your risk, but it does not guarantee that you're going to get it. Certain genes, like the APOE, E4, can raise the risk, but lifestyle factors also play an important role in whether or not someone develops Alzheimer's disease. Can Alzheimer's or dementia be prevented? Good question. Are there lifestyle changes that can reduce risk? The answer to that is while there is no guarantee way to prevent Alzheimer's disease, certain lifestyle changes may reduce the risk, such as regular exercise, a healthy diet, mental stimulation, social engagement, and managing other health conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. Managing the condition is really important. And we've really heard that for years, that you got to manage your blood pressure. You got to manage your diabetes. It's not okay that it's out of control. It's not okay that it's being treated. You need to manage it and make sure that it's as best as it can be. So these factors do contribute to when someone is more prone to develop Alzheimer's disease. How does age affect the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's disease? So age is the biggest risk factor. I've hinted to this before. I believe the statistic is most are diagnosed over the age of 65, but that risk doubles every 5 years after that. Those are pretty much the statistics. And then you look at the additional risk factors that we have talked about. So the longer we live, the more that we are prone to develop something like this, but it just is not a factor of just aging alone. Does a healthy diet or regular exercise lower the risk? And again, these are highly recommended. Studies suggest that regular physical activity and a healthy diet, especially diets rich in healthy fats like the Mediterranean diet, a balanced diet, can help reduce the risk of cognitive decline. More and more is coming out in and around the area of diet, and really just a healthy lifestyle in general really is being found to contribute to lower risk of dementia. Are there medications or treatments that can slow down or cure? So first off, there is no cure at this point of this recording of Alzheimer's disease. I have every hope that there is going to be, but there are medications out there that can help manage symptoms and slow the cognitive decline in some people, in some patients. That's where it's going to be important that your healthcare provider decide and evaluate and advise you on whether or not the medications that are currently on the market, if you're a candidate, and whether or not those are going to be impactful for you. Are there non-drug therapies that can help manage symptoms? And the answer to that would be yes. So we call those non-pharmacological therapies or non-drug therapies. And they include things like cognitive stimulation, physical exercise, maintaining a structure and routine in our life, engaging in therapeutic programs like music or art therapy, social engagement, keeping your mind active, maintaining hobbies, learning new hobbies. All of these things can improve on the quality of life and reduce any anxiety or depression that someone may be encountering, which do contribute to cognitive decline. What is the role of clinical trials in Alzheimer's treatment? I recently had someone from the Alzheimer's Association on to talk about just the progressive and hopeful things that are actually happening in the role of clinical trials and in research alone. There are things that are being done every month, every year that are really making a difference in the fight against this disease. Clinical trials are essential for testing new treatments and understanding the disease and how it responds. Participating in a trial may offer access to new therapies and contribute to advancing Alzheimer's research. And we highly support you, if that's something you choose to do, to participate in a clinical trial. That is how we are going to find a treatment and find a cure. How do we manage challenging behaviors like aggression, confusion, or wandering? These are really important, and people ask these things a lot. Managing strategies include creating a calm environment, using clear and simple communication, ensuring the person's basic needs are met, such as hunger, thirst, bathroom needs, those kinds of things, maintaining routines and a safe environment. And then learning about distraction techniques to avoid confrontation or learn how to help settle that person down, something that constantly will get them in a place where they're not stressed, they're not anxious. Find out what that is. And I think we all have that. We've talked about that on the podcast before, and we'll continue to. Using distraction techniques are really effective in helping someone who might be voicing behaviors. What can caregivers do to help a person with Alzheimer's disease maintain their quality of life? There are hundreds of thousands of unpaid caregivers out there in the world that are making a huge difference against this disease. Caregivers can provide emotional support, maintain that constant daily routine that's so important, offer opportunities for mental, social, and physical activities, keeping people safe, creating a calm and supportive environment. Staying patient and flexible is really the key. Learning as much as you can as a caregiver about this disease and trying several of these suggestions to see if it makes a difference in the life of the person that you're caring for. How can this person with Alzheimer's disease stay safe and independent for as long as possible? I have said this, and I think those of you who have listened to me know that this is key for me. Safety measures are imperative, but safety measures like simplifying the living environment, using reminders, setting up daily routines, installing safety locks and monitors, maybe even cameras, keeping familiar objects in place can help maintain independence. Medication reminders, the use of GPS trackers, all of these factors can really make a difference. I have an entire podcast in and around home safety, and I can't tell you how important that looking out for this person and making sure they're safe is. They're already more prone to visual deficits that could cause them to have fall imbalance and just in general, not processing what's safe and what isn't. Learning about these safety measures are really important in keeping this person safe. When should someone with Alzheimer's disease stop driving or handling finances? This is a real good one, is a question that I get more often than not. And I think for the most part, it comes out of guilt. It comes out of not knowing how to take away somebody's car. I mean, that's not something that we're built to be able to do. Telling someone that they're not safe is not an easy thing to do, especially if they're your spouse or your parent. The answer to this question really depends on the individual's cognitive abilities. This is also something you're going to want to discuss on your doctor's visits and with family in general and the individual. Obvious warning signs are going to include getting lost, confusion with simple tasks, poor decision making. Doctors and family members should assess these abilities, talk about them regularly, and have honest conversations about safety. I was just laughing the other day with my husband as we were reminiscing my mother and some of the things she did early on. My mother loved to shop. I've talked about that quite a lot. But she would go, I would say town. She would go to town. She would go shopping. She'd be out most of the afternoon, and she would come home with bags and bags of items and things where she had shopped and often went to the store. And she started doing that more and more. And we realized that she was going to the grocery store first, buying ice cream and frozen items, and then just going on for days. Well, we live in the tropics. Imagine what that half gallon of ice cream looked like by the time it got home. She would just do some of the funniest things. We laugh about them now. They weren't so funny then. But the fact that she never once considered that those frozen goods were not going to be able to stay frozen. And that's just something she never would have done before. I, re- I remember distinctly being behind her in a car and watching her go down the street, and a garbage truck was picking up garbage, and there was barely enough room to get through. And I guess she decided that she was going to go ahead and get around this garbage truck, not wait for it to move. And I watched the whole side, the whole metal trim of her Buick at that time just peel right off, and she just kept right on going. So that was a real sign for us. It's a funny story now. It was kind of horrifying at the time, but she had no comprehension that she had just done that. So we immediately had the conversation and took away her car. But thank God it wasn't worse. Thank God that wasn't a person or something like that. But clearly, she had no concept of space or waiting or processing skills. And so that's just a couple examples that I can share with you. I probably have hundreds of them, but those are the times that you want to have that conversation. It's probably time before they overpay bills or lose money or get scammed. And certainly driving is a real key factor as well. So what is the role of a caregiver and how they can cope with the stress of caregiving for someone with dementia? Proper care. Caregivers provide daily care, emotional support, help making decisions, coping with these things, these kind of factors and environmental factors, and how well care is there for this individual contribute to longevity. If a person is in an environment where they can't care for themselves, they're not eating, not drinking, not toileting, falling, all of these things are going to contribute to their demise. And it happens at a much quicker rate. And it isn't the disease that kills the person, it's these secondary factors. So the caregiver makes all the difference in the world, the environment that this person is in. And then the last question in this segment is, how do I prepare for later stages of Alzheimer's disease, including end stage of care and legal decisions? So we've talked about planning ahead is essential. You want to consider, what are the advance directives? What are the choices? What do you want done? Do you have a power of attorney? But really, what about care? What about tube feeding? What about excessive resuscitation techniques? What about those things? What is your wish? What do you want? And what do you not want? I think is more important. And having those conversations now will make all the difference when it comes to end of life, because boy, at end of life, it's just not a good time to have to sit down and make those kind of decisions. So these are the kind of things that will be helpful for caregiving or for those with Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, to just go over these questions, talk about them. You don't have to come up with the answers right away, but these are the kinds of things that the people that I have come in contact with had the opportunity to coach over my years and my professional career have asked these just common questions. So I want to switch in this segment to something a little bit different, but I think that you'll find helpful, or maybe you relate to this yourself. And that was a support group conversation that I want to share. I don't even remember what support group it was or how long ago it was, but in a recent support group, there was a woman, actually, she was a neighbor and a friend, and she made a comment and brought up a scenario and conversation about her neighbor. Her neighbor was clearly declining in her abilities and was showing very clear signs of dementia. She had dogs, and she became unable to really care for her dogs. And she had some family, but they didn't live in the same town as she did. And they had recently gotten her a puppy because they probably felt like, I'm just adding this, I don't know, it's a fact, that this would help her, that she might be lonely. So this woman, this neighbor, was concerned that her friend could not care for the dogs and wanted to know what she should do. What about the fact that the family lives a distance away and that she really didn't feel like the family was giving this woman the support that she required. So, first off, let's talk a little bit about the role of a friend and a neighbor versus a family member. And I know I've dealt with senior care geriatrics and had aging family members myself. In later life, people get very involved with their neighbors and they build a bond together. But there is a huge difference between being a friend or a neighbor and being a family member. And number one, it's a legal difference. There's one thing if you help somebody throughout, but if you have no legal right to make decisions for them, things get taken out of your hands. There's really kind of a balance. And that was the conversation. This woman didn't want to tell the family what to do, but she had some real concerns. So, in this scenario, this woman raises several concerns about the well being of not only the woman who is clearly declining and displaying dementia, but her pets and the role that the family was not providing adequate support. So, here's some key concerns that we went over in that support group and just began to talk about. We can't solve everything, but we can talk about what we could do or what we should do or what are some options if we choose to do them. And so here are some of the key concerns that we went over in the group that day. And that was the woman's ability to care for the dogs. As dementia progresses, a person's ability to care for themselves, let alone pets, will decline. And it can lead to potential neglect of the animals or even harm to a person. The impact of a new puppy. Puppies require a lot of care, attention, and energy, which may be overwhelming to someone with dementia. Plus, a puppy will get underfoot. The increased safety concerns for this woman are definitely there. Family's role in support. So, the family's decision to introduce a puppy, despite this woman's cognitive decline, suggests that this family may not fully understand her condition or its implications. And the fact that they live far away and are not actively supporting her raises concerns about the adequacy of her care. Now, let me tell you something about this scenario. It is very hard to live in another city or town or even adjoining town and go and visit someone who might be on their best behavior that day, or to talk to someone on the phone, even every day or every other day. You don't really know what's going on. So, someone who lives next door to a person is a lot more likely to see the decline than someone who's just visiting. Families have a great way to put on a air, to put on, confabulate what they're doing and what they're not doing. And then you dig in and find out that they really are not doing any of this, and perhaps they're really struggling. So, a family's role, they may not fully understand what's happening or what you're seeing. That's one key concern.
And then the woman's overall well being, despite pet care, is she taking care of herself?
This might indicate issues of self neglect or unmet care needs that this woman has, and her dementia could progress. Is she eating? Is she drinking? Is she taking care of herself? Is she taking her medicine? These are all kinds of things that need to be taken into consideration. So let's just talk about some of the suggestions that we made, because again, you are a friend and a neighbor. You're not a family member. Express some concern to the family. I suggested that she could reach out to the family and express her concerns about the woman's ability, what she's seeing, whether or not she is able to really take care of this animal and why. It's important to approach the conversation with compassion, emphasizing the well-being of both the woman and her animals, not really pointing out just what's wrong. She might say, I've noticed that Mary is struggling a bit with her memory and for caring for the dogs. I'm worried that the puppy might be too much for her right now, and here's why. These things can be very helpful. I know in my mother's case, and with many families, it has been the neighbor who's alerted the family to some of the things that just weren't normal. She's not taking out her trash. She's not picking up her paper. She's not emptying her mailbox, these kinds of things. Local support. The friend could offer help by checking in on the woman regularly if she can, assisting with pet care, such as walking the dog if she's able, which can help ease the burden and really check in on the condition. Encouraging professional help So the friend might suggest that the family explore professional help such as in-home care or pet service if they know of one. And then it might be helpful if you know of someone who maybe even in your own complex that's had someone come in and help out and make that suggestion. You cannot make the determination. It's not yours to make. But I think if you are a true friend and you want to help, that these are some of the ways that you could do so. Now,
If you find that this woman is in neglect and in disrepair, you probably need to contact Adult Protective Services.
that is not ratting on someone or turning them in. It makes sure that social services, adult protective services, can ensure that this woman gets the appropriate care that she needs. And perhaps maybe she needs to move closer to the family. Really important. If she is really struggling, you want to make sure that you step in, raise your voice. You have someone else in authority to make sure that she's safe. I mean, that is the neighborly thing to do. And again, there are questions that may arise or questions that you may have. And let's talk about those. We cannot assume that families are just being neglectful. You need to ask yourself, how much awareness does the family have about her condition? She's always lived independent. She's always lived a distant away. They may not be aware of the full extent of her cognitive decline. It is very easy. I saw my mother do it for years to just fool other people. They would not see her cognitive decline. And people who knew her in the past. Do they understand how dementia can affect her ability to manage her daily tasks, such as pet care? Perhaps they don't. Perhaps they think they're just doing a good thing. You don't know why the family chose to get her a puppy. Maybe she asked for one. Maybe she complained she was lonely and she missed her dog that's passed away. We don't know those things. Is the family planning to provide any additional support? The family might not even be aware that you exist, and perhaps they are. And you can say, hey, I'm here. I'll be glad to check on her and I'll let you know. We can talk. I'll call you if anything comes up. What's the woman's current ability to care for herself and her pet? Is she feeding them, walking them, cleaning up after the dogs? Is her living environment safe for both her and her pets? Those are things that you need to kind of know and explore if you're able, if you're interested. You may be able to go over and visit and see inside what's happening. Are the risks to the woman's health and safety there? Are the dogs a tripping hazard? Or are the dogs not cared for? Could they become aggressive or stressed? Those kind of things. And is it time to seek outside help? You may be in a condition where you're elderly too, and you're not in a position to take care of someone, but you can make sure that social services or Department of Elder Affairs is aware of this woman and someone is looking out for her best interest. Certainly, I think that that's a neighborly thing to do. Addressing this situation is important for the woman's safety and well-being, for the pet's welfare as well, to avoid further decline. I've seen people be moved into memory care who were totally declining at home. And once they had that little bit of support they needed, their medication regular, their meals and care, they completely turned around and had good quality life for several more years. And then engaging the family in the right type of support. You'd be very surprised what you don't know and what families don't know or don't see. I remember in the early days as I began talking about my mother and sharing with her more distant old friends that lived in different parts of the country, even family. And they would just be very surprised. Oh, I just talked to Betty a couple months ago and she seemed so good. And we had a great conversation and they had no idea. This can be the case. I don't think it's intentional on people's part, but this could be happening. So this scenario is a delicate balance between ensuring the woman's independence and well-being while also protecting her and being a good friend and really addressing the needs of her pets. They don't have a choice in this matter. So engaging the family, exploring local resources are key steps in resolving this situation. And I think as a good friend and a neighbor, even if it's not kind of your responsibility, picking up the phone and doing the right thing and talking about it could be the difference between getting someone the care they need and having found out that they fell and laid on the floor for a number of hours or even days. We always appreciate that neighbor and that friend. Do what you can, ask the right questions. And until next time, I appreciate you listening to the podcast. I hope that you will subscribe, visit us on YouTube, on Instagram. Look at our website, thedisappearingmind.com. Look at our resources we have available, and stay tuned for future podcasts. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode, visit our website to suggest future topics, and share the podcast with friends and family.